You've been in Amsterdam now, living for a lot of years.
Yes.
So, I mean, is London still home? Does this still feel like coming home?
I'm a Londoner. I mean, that's who I am. That's what I am. I'm a Londoner. You know, wherever I go, I'm a Londoner. That's it. I'm in Amsterdam, but I'm 40 minutes away on a plane, and my mum gave me grief, and I'm back home. Yeah.
We don't want your mum to give you grief at all.
Me too, seriously.
Let's talk about Blitz. We're going to come back to Blitz, which is the world premiere of which is tonight. It feels like a London film to its bones.
Very much.
And it's set, obviously, in 1940, but when I saw the film, I have been lucky enough to see it already. You will see it later. It also felt like a product of a 1970s London childhood, when, like, at that point, the war and the effects of the war and the Blitz were still actually a physical reality for Londoners.
Very much a physical reality. I mean, I grew up, in West London, Shepherd's Bush at first, and Ledbury Grove and Ealing. I mean, represent. Love it. Represent. I grew up in the Venture playgrounds, with these alternative playgrounds, run by hippies, which were very dangerous, if you can remember, if anyone's here, we grew up, goodness gracious, tires swinging across this, these were sites they were bombed out sites, which were never sort of, they were just left as they were. Walking home past terrace houses and it being interrupted by a 50s build and continuing on, of course, that is where a bomb fell. So the Blitz, again, was surrounding my childhood, and I imagine most of our childhood or people who live here in the 70s and 80s. And unbeknownst to me, that was a part of the landscape. A sort of silent sort of history which was around us, this ghost which was present, very, very present, but not sort of evident in a way of labeling what was what.
Before we get too deeply into the films, you've obviously had this career in this life before and parallel to your life as a filmmaker, as an artist. And I wonder how those different identities speak to each other. The Steve McQueen, the artist, Steve McQueen, the filmmaker, are they colleagues? Are they friends? Are they rivals?
You know what? How can I say is I never think of myself as anything other than me, as it were. I mean, I never think, when I say that, I never think of artist, filmmaker, or I just do stuff. I just do stuff, and I'm lucky to do stuff, and I never differentiate those two sort of practices. Sometimes something needs to be a film, and other times something needs to be an artwork, and that's about it. And I think what's great about this generation is they don't label themselves. I mean, maybe certain people were forerunners of that, and you could do what the hell you want to do as long as it's half decent. You know what I mean?
Let's look at one of the films to begin with, though. We have Hunger from 2008, which is your first feature. So it's a film for people who haven't seen Hunger. First of all, go and see Hunger belatedly. It's a film about the Irish Republican hunger strikers in 2008. I wonder, at that point, to make a British film about Irish republicanism, where the Republicans weren't these ballied-up terrorist villains, that felt bold. I mean, we will come back to this theme with Blitz, but did it feel like a risk? Did it feel like a gamble?
You know what? I just thought it'd be my first film and my last film, so I thought, go out with two guns blazing. You know what? I came across the subject. I grew up in an environment where, there was this activity going on in Northern Ireland and Ireland in the UK, and it was part of my everyday. It was part of my living existence as a Londoner, as being British, and the fact of this gentleman called Bobby Sands and what was going on then, I just thought I needed to make a picture about it. It was, again, I was an artist, I was working as an artist, and I thought, no, this needs to be a feature film. So it was the subject that made me want to make this into a feature film, and it demanded to be a narrative. Why did it demand to be a narrative? Because it was a story that wasn't really told. I mean, I grew up in a situation putting the TV on, and there's a gentleman's photograph with a number above it, and thinking, is that his age? And my mother saying to me, that's how many days this person will be on hunger strike. And me identifying with that, because again, as a child, the only power you have is to refrain from eating. That's the only power you have.
Yeah.
And then your mother or your father sends you upstairs without any food or whatever. Imagine that's the only power you have is to stop eating. That's the only power you have, and it's pretty powerful. And then doing my research, I remember that Pauline Kael had an interview with Goddard, and he was talking about the Bayern Mannhof, and he was talking about Bobby Sands, and he was talking about childish, something about childishness about it, and it kind of actually just referred back to me as a child, and having the only power I had was to refrain from eating. So therefore, immediately I had this link, and I thought, okay, let's dig into this.
And the film is so vivid and it's so fully formed. I remember seeing it for the first time, and you sit down, and obviously you did already have this reputation as an artist, so you're curious as to what you've delivered with the feature film, and then it's kind of mind-blowing. I don't want to talk too much. We actually have a clip from Hunger, and there's a lot to talk about, so let's watch the clip and then pick the conversation up afterwards.
The dirty protest and the blanket protest, which has been going on for years, all in support of the same demand: political status, that is to say, different treatment for people who commit crimes, hideous crimes, for what they claim to be a political motive, and that is what the government will not grant.
So I should have said, I mean, that's very, very early in the film. And when I rewatched the film, what struck me, among the many things, was how much confidence you have, obviously in your own filmmaking, but also in the audience, in the people watching, because that scene comes in. We're not introduced to this character. We don't know who he is. You see that scene unfold. It plays on beyond that as well. There's very little context, but you have total faith that the audience, and filmmakers don't always treat audiences as smart individuals, but you take us for being smart and smart enough to follow the film.
Yeah, I mean, I had never been on a movie set before until I made Hunger. Never been. I didn't want to. In fact, I had an opportunity to be on a film set. I went on my own. I was just. I had a conversation with this gentleman called Sean Bobbitt, and Sean had done a movie which I loved, which was what was that bloody movie? It will come in a second. And I think it was shot on Super 16, and I loved the movie, and I had a conversation with him, and again, we were working, and I gave him a script that he wanted to do it, and that was great. I suppose what it was, you know, I grew up in an environment like yourself and a lot of people, like the BBC or the TV, where things were way above my head when I'm watching. I'm like, what the hell's going on? But at a certain point, you get into it. At a certain point, you're sort of, they're not talking down to you, they're talking up to you, so you have to rise to the sort of subject matter. And somehow it elevated your interest. It sort of, for me, it was just something which was sort of, you wanted to know more. And again, audiences are smart. They're smart people. And again, if they don't get it, they get it later. And to reward our audience for their attention, and to reward the audience for their sort of thinking back in time on a narrative is for me, it could only sort of be stimulating. It could only be sort of, rewarding to sit there and watch something unfold.
I mean, the other thing you're doing in that sequence, obviously, is in a film about Bobby Sands and the hunger strikers, you're taking us almost feels backstage. It's like the staff room in a school. You're introducing us to the guards.
What was very much interested in is ritual. Ritual. When you get up in the morning, you get up and you wipe sleep from your eyes. You sort of you have 5 minutes of dazing, whatever. Maybe someone reaches for their phone now. Right, and then get up and you brush your teeth and all these things that you take for granted, you don't think about. And I thought, oh, let's study that. What is that? Because you take it for granted. I remember sort of interviewing, interviewed a lot of people who actually were on the hunger strike and said, okay, was it raining? Well, what kind of rain? It's all about the things in between, the spaces in between the words of history books, because that's why I was interested. What made motivations? What made actions? It was also the environment. And this ritual of this prison officer, this was actually, there were prison officers who lived on that street. And it was this ritual of obviously a car bomb, which they would do. And I love the idea of this sort of, this idea of ritual. And just looking.
And how precisely are you mapping in advance? Because like with that sequence, for instance, it starts, and it's kind of an excerpt from within a scene.
Yes.
You have the keys, and then you follow the sequence through, and then we're moving through spaces. So we move from freedom into captivity, into prison. And then there's another set of keys, and it's got the Union Jack there on there. And you don't labour that point, but it's there. I mean, is that something which comes together later, or is that something where actually on the day you're shooting exactly what you're trying to achieve?
That comes together often on the day we're shooting, because I love it, the fact that scripts can only take you so far, and it's the magic of movie making, the magic of filmmaking. That things I'm an interest. For me, what's important is from the catering to hair and makeup to the electricians, the sparks, the gaffers. Everybody is together. It's our movie. So once you have a situation where everyone's together, everyone feels it's their movie. They're involved. I take a good idea from anybody. I'm not, I think a director is not about being an arsehole. A director is about listening, and feeling and smelling and tasting and finding, and then, yeah, that's interesting. Whoa, look at that. Okay, let's do that. Yeah, okay, yeah, interesting. Because it's our movie. And then once that is apparent, the foundations are set, then when the actor comes on board, actors are like, they're highly sensitive individuals. They could feel if something's up. And if they feel they're in a safe space, they feel they're in a space where there's a certain kind of structure where they feel that there is this support and there's a certain kind of togetherness, then they'll go for it. Because it's a safe space for them to explore and not to be judged. It's beautiful. And then things happen, Again, I think, it's about, it's about being alive in the moment, I'm not a cartoonist, I don't do storyboards. So it's about what can happen in the moment. It's very important that.
A director shouldn't be an arsehole is definitely the quote of the morning so far.
There's too many arseholes, trust me.
I'll take your word for that, Steve. So I've heard, right? Yeah. After Hunger, you don't come back to England. You actually move on. You take that journey over to America. You make what ends up becoming like a trilogy of American films. And it starts in New York with Shame. Yeah. New York's another city that you actually have a connection with, right?
Yes. I have a lot of relatives there. And I went to NYU. The first time I went to the States in New York, it was 1977. Elvis died and there was a blackout. I remember that clearly when I was there with my uncle. But honestly, I didn't want to make Shame originally in New York. I wanted to make it in London. But what happened at that point, there was two things happened at that point. There was this sort of situation where Tiger Woods happened. It was myself and Abby Morgan that wrote the script. And when Tiger Woods happened, and there was the Murdoch, there was a lot of things with Murdoch happening at that time as far as, I think it was scandals or things going on at that time. People just didn't want to talk. Everything was shut down. We couldn't get anyone to talk about, the subject matter. So then I thought to myself, okay, well, let's go, the city that never sleeps, New York. And it was the best decision I ever made because there it was. It was there. And we spoke to therapists and, sex therapists and so forth who work with people like that and also people who are sex addicts. And it was like the bloody Matrix. It was like, oh my, we walked out these sort of conversations. It was like the world was totally different. It was amazing. And there's me and Abby, it was like Columbo and Ironside. We just make our notes and so I know in cafes and make paper, but it really was the investigative reporting, and we just got together and then it was beautiful. It was fun. It was fun to do.
It feels like there's two things going on at once, at least two things, because you have New York and the cinematic splendor of New York, and it feels like you're kind of enjoying that. And
Very
yet,
much.
obviously, the film, as you say, it's about sex addiction. It's also, without labouring the point and doing that journalist thing of drawing out themes, it's another film about confinement. It's a film about someone confined within an addiction.
Yeah, it's about trauma and how it sort of how it sort of manifests. It's about Sissy, it's about Brandon, it's about these two this brother and sister. It's a family drama in a way, but within an epic sort of within a city, this epic city. Because often I would be in New York in a high-rise sort of hotel room or whatever, and I would look out, because we're Londoners, we don't have that view. We don't have that view at all. And you would look out, and I said, okay, it would be like the telescope turning around as a microscope. Because, okay, who am I within this? Having that perspective really puts you in sort of some sort of state of who am I within this world? What is my place? Who am I? It's quite confronting, actually. And therefore, that's how, Brandon and who he was within that situation, and Sissy and so forth. But yeah, it's to do with how trauma sort of, again, it's sort of, manifests itself in adulthood, as children.
I remember reading an interview with you at the time saying at that point it was the first contemporary film you'd made, 2011, and that you wanted to make a film which was in some senses about 2011, and you wanted, I remember the quote was, in 20 years' time, I want people to look back and say, that was that year. So we're 13 years kind of into that process now, and I still think it holds up. It's that idea, I guess, of being like a historian of the now, like you're pinning down what the now is. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think, again, it's interesting how, again, the generations now, the young people now, are talking about things that we, as I grew up, never talked about. Again, trauma, things like that. It was like walk it off. You know what I mean? You would never talk about anything, or like, oh, I'm hurting. It's like, shut up, get on with it. What's the matter with you? Come on, shut it. And now, this is what things are unraveling now. I have such a great relationship with my daughter, thank Jesus, or thank God, or thank Allah, whoever, that she could talk to me in a way that I could open up myself and think, okay, yeah. Because I've been taught, as a black man, as a black person, get on with it. And I thank God I got on with it, because I wouldn't be sitting here now. I can't, I don't have the privilege of as a black man to sort of sometimes to think, okay, I'm hurt and upset, because I got to get the fuck on with it. I got to get the fuck on with it. I don't have that fucking privilege to sort of have that sort of that situation sometimes. But I know I have to, because for my mental health, I have to. But it was interesting to sort of think about Brandon and Sissy in that way, have it, playing out their trauma within their lives and in ways which are sort of unhealthy. So yeah, you could look back at that and have those kind of conversations as you said, and they're doing the best they can with what it is. But the intimacy that Brandon obviously is scared of is very much and the oversharing of Sissy is heavy. It's heavy stuff.
Let's talk about 12 Years a Slave, because as you say, because Hunger stands kind of alone, I think, and then Shame is a film, I think, in some ways about whiteness. You talked about it as a film about entitlement in some ways at the time. And then 12 Years a Slave comes along. Obviously, at this point, you are moving back in history, the 1840s. And to a story of Solomon Northup, a freedman who is sold into slavery within America. I mean, that always seemed like a very crucial part of the story. This was such a definitively American story. It's a monumental piece of work now, even now. I want to, again, watch a clip and then let's pick up the conversation. It feels like 12 Years a Slave is another pulling back of the curtain. I mean, in that sequence particularly, there's the gentility and civility, and then you pull back the curtain to what's really going on there.
Heavy shit. Oh my goodness. I went back there. 12 Years a Slave. Okay, right. So I go to Hollywood, yeah? What happens when you go to Hollywood? You do one movie, and then I end up at certain studios, and they think, it's Hunger, make some noise, blah, 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 I can, all that business. There's a long story about Hunger. One day I'll tell everybody. It's really fascinating. One day I'll tell
I'm going to come back to that. You realise that?
It's a very fascinating story. Anyway, moving on. I might spill the beans. Why not? Publicists say no. Right, moving on. How the world really works. Moving on. I went to studios, and I think people thought I was white. Of course, I don't know. But of course, I say because I did Hunger, and I was like, and I remember sort of seeing them sort of looking at me, and you have these meetings. And these meetings lead nowhere, but everybody there's a meeting about a meeting. There's time to spend, time to sort of waste in a day in Hollywood. This is back in the day. So we're talking sort of 2009, 2008, whatever. And it was kind of apparent to me that it was almost like slavery at that. When I was doing these meetings, it's almost like slavery happened here. This is something that actually happened here. This is something that actually happened here. And I thought to myself, you know what? Somehow it was sort of riled me in a way. And I thought, you know what? I want to make a movie about slavery. And I remember ringing my agent and saying, you know what? I want to make a movie about slavery. You know what? Because at that time, it felt like the debate of slavery, or the evidence of slavery was everywhere in the States, everywhere in Europe as well, obviously. But it was just almost like there was this deafening silence. And I thought, you know what? I want to make a movie about slavery. And that was it. And that, I just sort of started off to find this sort of idea of it. And then, came across this book called 12 Years a Slave.
And it's interesting you say that, because again, lots and lots of different things going on in 12 Years a Slave. But we saw a little glimpse of it there in the restaurant scene. And then it runs throughout the film, is this the look of a Hollywood movie. And it felt very deliberate and very pointed that this was a Hollywood film. And even when you are dealing, as you do, very, very full-frontally, confrontationally, with the horror and the barbarism, this is an American film that you're making.
For sure. It had to be American film, because you want to serve it back. Here we go. Here you go. That's yours. But in the most elegant way. I mean, again, I am not new to... I'm not new, because you think of American movies, you think of German filmmakers. German filmmakers, one whatever, made America. I mean, that made American pictures. I mean, the foundation's a lot of classic American, and of course, Hitchcock. So I'm not an alien, so I'm very much ingrained in the history of Hollywood as a European going over there making American pictures.
And then there's this definitively Hollywood moment when the film wins Best Picture, first Best Picture directed by a black filmmaker. Hollywood feels very pleased with itself at that point. What's going through your mind on Oscar night?
I met Prince. That was great. Really good. Prince met my mom. He took these shades off, met my mom. It was, oh my God, Prince, man. Oh my God. That was really unbelievable. Yeah, Prince. What's going through my mind? Look, it was heavy, man. It was heavy. Again, the narrative that, look, we won that thing, 11 years ago now? And it still comes up. It gets... it gets the response to that picture. There's articles written about it. Just not more than a few articles written about it now, and it's just it holds. And honestly, I know for a fact that if President Obama wasn't president, that movie would not have been made. I really do believe that if he wasn't president, that movie would not have been made. It was an in, and I don't know. I'm just happy because this is before Oscars So White. This is before loads of things were being spoken about, and I think the proudest thing I think that came out of 12 Years a Slave was that after that a lot of black filmmakers got an opportunity to make their movie because it was a blockbuster. It made loads of money from a very small budget. So I think maybe one's okay. So a lot of movies got made because of that movie. And also the conversation about slavery, I think, was ignited because of that movie. So I'm grateful for that it could have some kind of everlasting situation where people are still, it resurrected the sort of popular debate about slavery, a popular debate about slavery.
I mean, the timing is so interesting, though, because, 2014 at that point, and 12 Years a Slave and everything that it achieves is part of this. There are some voices, generally, and in Hollywood particularly, who think, well, actually now we're here, we're wherever we were going. Obama's in the White House, 12 Years a Slave has won an Oscar. Nobody's heard of Trump as a politician at that point. Nobody's thought of the word Brexit. There were some voices that in 2014 that were saying, we've arrived, this is like it.
Yes, and I think the next year there was not one black nomination, and that's when Oscar So White happened. So you know what, I mean, it is what it is. I don't even know how to add to that, Danny, mate.
Tell us what happens afterwards, because I think you do something professionally brilliant, which is that there's such gravity and there's such heft around 12 Years a Slave, and then you make Widows, which is this spectacular thriller. It's like just a beautiful, crowd-pleasing movie. But tell us how you get from A to B.
Oh, goodness. Well, how did I get to A to B? I just wanted, I love, growing up in the 70s, 80s, I remember Widows as a TV show, and how impactful that drama was. I mean, I remember the headline that it beat sort of Coronation Street off the top sort of viewed program for however long it was. But what I loved about it was these women who were deemed as not capable. And the fact that they came together from different sort of ethnicities and different sort of backgrounds to come together as a collective and found each other and created a group in order to sort of do this heist. I thought it was kind of interesting to sort of to reinvestigate now, and also to reinvestigate in Chicago, because Chicago for me, as a landscape, it had everything, because Chicago is broken up into ethnical areas, religious areas, politics. You had race, you had politics, and you had religion. It was amazing. It's like, oh, it's all here. So it's like this, the landscape, the environment was all here to play with. And of course, the first time I ever went to Chicago was at that art exhibition, but also my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was going to the Democratic Convention. So I just loved the idea of this sort of art and politics kind of colliding. And I thought this could be a wonderful, fertile ground to sort of look at all these dynamics.
As a filmmaker, I mean, it really, Widows feels like you're having a lot of fun.
It is, and also at the same time, Me Too came out. As we were making the picture, Me Too was happening. That was interesting, because I had a lot of debates with people when we were making that film. It was beautiful, because film sets are, for me at least, it's beautiful to meet people, to have these kind of debates, have these conversations, and also people are safe to have those conversations, because I like to create an environment where everyone can have a voice. So as well as us making the picture, we're having these debates about Me Too and whatnot and what we're doing and so forth. So it was great to sort of have Viola and Elizabeth and everybody on the picture together, having these wonderful in-depth debates about the actual time we're living in, and actually making this picture. It's fantastic. It's exciting. You
can no comment me at this stage.
Please.
But I wonder, with Widows, do you feel like, given that you have just won an Oscar with your previous movie, do you feel like you got enough support from the film industry, from the American film industry with that film? Enough of a push?
You know what? Yeah, well, all I can say about Widows is that, look at the movie.
Widows is brilliant.
Look at the movie, and again, sometimes, it's timing. Because if I made that movie now, it'd be a different thing, Again, and the people behind the machine would do something different, So it's all about timing, and I think with Widows we were ahead of the curve on that one.
Hugely.
And it's just one of those things where I make movies to make movies, and I'm very lucky to do that. So I can't complain. But at that time, I knew at that time. I mean, just look at the poster. All I'll say is just look at the poster. It should have been the 4 women on that poster. And I said it should be the 4 women on that poster, and I was oh no, Steve, it should be this, should be that. So what do you have on the poster, for example, is you have, everybody on the poster, all the characters. So it's like, if it's for everybody, it's for no one. I wanted the 4 women on the poster. It's widows. It's these 4 widows, and we had, it was all, it was. So I wouldn't say it was, I was. How can I say? People weren't ready yet. People didn't understand. They weren't ready yet. They just weren't ready yet.
But that film will be rediscovered, right? I have every confidence.
With the right poster as well.
Let's talk about Small Axe, because it feels like at that point, like when I was making my notes, I was going to say you come back to London, but of course, as a filmmaker, Small Axe is actually the first work that you've made in London, and it's the first film you've made, or series of films, about the Black British experience as well. Yes. So again, I'm going to ask you an A to B question, how Widows turns into Small Axe creatively.
When I was doing Small Axe, Grenfell happened. I remember Grenfell happening, and I was like, "What the hell?" And I was in Chicago shooting, and I saw this thing happening. I remember just thinking, "What the hell?" And at that time, how old am I? I don't know. I'm sort of at a certain age where you start to look back, and who am I? What am I? What am I bloody doing here? And I just wanted to come home. And I wanted to investigate, a recent past, and therefore understanding the building blocks that got me to where I am. I stand on people's shoulders. The only reason I'm here is because there's been a pyramid of people who have made sacrifices and done certain things to get me sitting here talking to Danny. Fact. That's it. No one gave us anything, but there were sacrifices that was made. And I never forget that, and I never could forget that. And as a Londoner, I wanted to come home. I really wanted to come home. I really wanted to come home and to be on a movie set with people who maybe had a shared experience as such. Anyway, moving on swiftly. I just wanted to come home and focus and study that a certain period in time that got us to this point. That was it, and it was late. very late 70s, early 80s, early 80s to the late 80s.
If you never watched small acts back then, you said you didn't watch your films back very much.
God no, I can't. But I don't.
Oh, you're missing a trick.
You know what?
One thing
I like was, but I like hearing. I like hearing very much about what was it? A movie? What was it? Lovers Rock. I like hearing about Lovers. People like thinking like it's like a fucking record, man. People just put that movie on to just look at it again because it's like people put that record on. I mean, and it's like a record. People love watching that over and over again. I was like, oh wow, okay, thanks. I'll, I haven't watched it over, but people like it like a record.
Okay, I swear down we didn't rehearse this, but we have a clip of Lovers Rock that I would very much like to play and talk about. So let's do that.
Such a long time now. Oh my God.
I wish we had an hour just to talk about I wish we had an hour just to talk about that scene. You know?
Yeah, man, I feel good. God blimey.
Okay, good. Because my next question was, there's such joy that just comes.
You know
off that
what?
whole
Because it
sequence.
comes from so much pain and hurt and upset. You understand? When my mom and dad used to come home, I have no idea what my mom and dad had to go through. Just to sort of, could you imagine the humiliation? Could you imagine the sort of upset they had to go through? So, and I will receive it. I will receive it with a belt sometimes, because their frustration. I would see it, I'll get beaten, like, most West Indian children, black children get beaten because, and also, I didn't know at the time, I didn't know the suffering, the upset, the humiliation at work, or how they would come about things. Things would come out. And the whole idea of when people went to a dance, when they were going to a dance, for a week, my mum would have a pattern. And she would be making that, get the material in the market, and for a whole week preparing make that dress for the dance. And then the dance would come out, and the guys with their shirts and their perfume and their aftershave and their beautiful shirts, and they would go to the dance. It was a release. The sexuality, the sort of the camaraderie, that moment, that night, those blues were just it was church. That was the release, and. It was beautiful. It was joy beyond joy. Beyond a cup runneth over because what else is there to do?
I wanted to ask about your frame of mind actually shooting, like small acts in general.
Can I tell you a story?
Of course you can.
I'll tell you a story about my father. Just before he died, my father told me a story. I did an artwork about it recently called Sunshine State. My father used to pick fruits, oranges in Florida, and what happened? They used to gather a lot of people in the West Indies, young men to pick fruits in Florida. And my dad would be one of them, and they went to Florida to pick fruit. This is late 50s. And then you couldn't go out, of the camp. You go out and pick fruits and you come back to the camp, but you could never go out. So one night, these two Jamaican guys said to my dad was called Phil, because Phil, come on, let's go out. Let's go over the wall, let's go get a drink. So my dad and these two Jamaican guys went out into the night and found this town. They went to have a drink in this bar. So as they walked into the bar, it was like a Western, like these white people, their mouths would sort of leave their glasses and go as these three men walked to the bar. And then one of the Jamaican guys with my father says, "Can I get a drink, please?" And the barman said, "We don't serve niggers." So the Jamaican guy goes, "You don't serve niggers? Well, then we'll serve ourselves." He took a bottle and smashed it over the bartender's head. And all three of them ran out into the night. They ran into the night. It was pitch black, they ran into the night. So my dad told me that just before he died, he ran into the night, and then there were dogs, and they were being chased, and it was pitch black. And then my dad hid in a ditch. And then my dad heard these two loud bangs. Silent. He said it didn't move a millimeter, not an inch. He couldn't see left from right from left, pitch black. Somehow, he made his way back to the camp. He never saw those two men again. So you can imagine my dad carrying that with him for, forever, until before he died. He told me that before he died. So therefore, sometimes there's some issues with my dad. I have so many issues with my dad. Sometimes I didn't know that I thought he was sort of like holding me back sometimes, but I didn't realize until that story, he was holding me tight. He was holding me tight. So when you see things like that on the screen, you see black music, you see this is the joyous of life. We don't take it for granted. It's heavy. This is the evidence of this. And also, the precariousness of a black male. I mean, I might not be alive to talk to you, Danny, mate. That's me. That's my history. I have to carry that shit with me, too. I mean, I might not be alive.
How much of that pain is there with you, like front and center when you're shooting? Or when you're shooting, is it a different corner of your psyche? Is it like we're getting the work done? Or is the emotion always there?
We don't care. We're having a great time. I mean, look. What was great about that? There were black people behind the camera, in front of the camera. People being themselves. It was absolutely beautiful. That scene was absolutely beautiful. Sometimes you're very lucky, and also like in Blitz, we were so lucky in certain things as well. It was Saoirse and Elliot and Paul. This love between these three people. There was real love. It was real. It was so what I like to do often is to say action. My job as the director is sometimes just to get out of the fucking way, create the atmosphere and get out of the way. It's not about dictating. It's about creating. It's very important. But if you're young directors out here, create. Don't dictate. Create, because there's people who've got better ideas and you can help your vision. In fact, see things you'll never even think about, which will elevate it to a place where you don't know what would happen. And this is it. This is what's happened. And these young black people were portraying their aunts, their uncles, their fathers, their mothers, grandfathers, grandmothers. They knew and they felt comfortable with each other. Sexuality, physicality, joy, to sing in front of, to see you and to sing. You see you mean sing and you sing. Black people, it was beautiful. You couldn't make that shit up. You can't make that up. You can't write that shit. You got to create that shit.
And part of the genius of Small Axe is that it ends up going out on BBC One at a time. A little quirk of fate means that like the entire country is sitting there under lockdown, like watching telly at that point.
I told the commentator at the beginning of the bit, turn the volume up. That was great.
And Widows, we talked about Widows. It's a multiplex film. Blitz is an epic. It always feels like part of what you're doing is you're not putting this stuff in a niche. You want this to put these stories in front of as many people as possible. That always feels really central to what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. What can I say about that? But also, I want to give to as many people as possible, of course, but not to sort of talk down, but to talk up. You don't have to be in a situation where you talk down to a large audience. Who knew? Fucking 12 years a slave. Who fucking knew? No one fucking knew. But I didn't make no money out of that picture. People made loads of money out of that picture. I made nothing. I jest. But no, they made loads of money. The DVD sales are low. I mean, people are happy, boy. That's why black people got to make movies after that. Trust me, unbelievable.
Let me ask you about, because I want to make sure that people get a chance to ask questions as well. So I'm going to rattle through a couple of things.
Yeah.
I want to mention Occupied City, which played here at the London Film Festival last year, which is a different kind of movie. It's a 4-hour film. And for people who didn't see it, it juxtaposes kind of images of contemporary Amsterdam, and that was actually all through COVID and then the invasion of Ukraine, with a voiceover explaining what actually happened to Nazi-occupied Amsterdam during the Second World War. Very, very different film to Blitz. But is there a rhyme going on there? It feels like on one level there's like, in terms of time, in terms of the thematics of it, there's a major rhyme.
I think in all of them is illuminating ghosts. Illuminating ghosts. Things that what made the foundation of our lives. Even I told that story about my father. Illuminating ghosts, illuminating, the actual reason why things have occurred, and which often get lost in between the gaps of history. It's very important to illuminate that so you have an idea of why, who, how, and what. And as an artist, it's exciting because you're bringing images that never been seen before. Why? Why has there never been a scene with women, in a factory, making? But there were the emotional backbone and the emotional physical situation. The emotional backbone, but also the emotional the workforce of the UK. Where are those bombs coming from? From somewhere. But often when you see a movie with a woman in the Second World War, she's giving someone a fucking cup of tea. Stop that shit. These are the images. These are things which actually happened. How were bombs in the front? It's crazy. It's like it's so rich. Looking at the history of the Blitz and doing the research, it was like, oh, this is amazing. This is, we have a character in Blitz called Mickey Davis. A small guy called Mickey Davis. who basically one of the architects of the NHS. I mean, how do we not know who that guy is? It's incredible. And it's so amazing, these stories, and so visual, these stories. And it's actually what, it's as a filmmaker, I'm swimming in it. Look at this. But also it's what has made us who we are today. It's not sort of anything other than giving sort of the sort of, how can I say, giving people the voice and giving people the sort of, giving people visibility, giving a situation visibility that has helped to create where we are now. It's very important, very, very important.
Blitz is so good, I'll tell you that now. We're going to look at a clip and then pick the conversation up.
What is your name?
George.
So how the hell did you end up here?
My mum sent me away.
She did it to keep you safe.
Your son did not arrive at his destination.
You're responsible for his safety. Why can't you tell me? Where's my boy? This is for all the parents whose children have been evacuated, and for my boy, George.
Make a wish.
One wish.
Just before we go to questions from you guys, that kid in the playground that you talked about at the start of this, does that kid understand London a little bit more now, having made Blitz?
Yes, and I understood London. One of the best things about London is being dragged about by your mother, because I was a donkey. I used to miss football focus, because I used to go around to all these different markets in London, because my mother, she's called Mary, but every West Indian person has a nickname. My mother's called Agatha. So Agatha, there's planting, for 15 cents a pound, and in Hackney Markets. All of a sudden I'd be saying, come and get your bag. And I was like, why am I going? Because I was carrying these shopping bags. So I'd be going to Hackney, I'd be going to sort of bloody West, I'd be going to, it was a market in Soho. I would go there for material. There was that Berkshire was so amazing. There was all these sort of Jewish flipping tailors, and they were dealing with the celebrities, and you would go, no, they're all right, Garth Crooks. Because at that time I was smaller, big Garth. Then you go to sort of Mile End, then you go to West London, then you go to North London Market. So you got an idea of London that I never would have got without being the donkey carrying his bags behind your mother. And this I just love this. Again, I'll be very quick. I was very fortunate to go to school with Greek, Polish, Pakistani, Iranian, Jamaican, Nigerian, French, Turkish. I went to school with so many different kind of people. I didn't even, that was the only thing was important to us guys and the girls. It was football and girls. And with the girls, it was I don't know what style or fashion or whatever it was. But it was amazing. I didn't know who was from. The only thing I thought, Raza was from Pakistan and Reza was from Iran. Okay, I was so lucky living in this city, because unfortunately things aren't as they were then. Growing up in it was fucking mad. It was like fun, man, and we didn't know anywhere. Everyone was from somewhere. Of course, Ireland or fucking England or whatever, Wales or all of that business. It was fucking amazing. So at this point in time in the world when everyone's so divided, it's kind of unfortunate. But you've asked me. I went off on one, didn't I?
No,
But,
it was a beautiful tangent.
I went
right?
off on one, but I was very lucky as a Londoner. This city it's just so beautiful. It was just incredible. Pericles. Fuck me, you think about how I went to school, it was beautiful. It was so marvelous, Danny, mate. Jewish, fucking everything. Went to people's houses for dinner. What's this? What's that you're eating? Oh, that's interesting. It was beautiful. It was so amazing. But, hey, life goes on, eh? It is a case of, for me at least, you just have to focus. Go for it. Get on with it. I know it's brutal. I know there's going to be bumps. There's going to be hurt. There's going to be things. But sometimes you got to put that aside and just get on with it. Yeah, you can't. You have to carry it with you. Take it with you. Okay, I'll bring it with me and deal with it at a certain point. But it's a case of getting on with it. Keep going. Don't fucking. If I have to stop and think about how much nonsense is going on and nonsense, I don't know where I'd be. But just focus and keep going on. Just move it. Focus on what you need to do. And that will also answer some of those questions that you have, or that sort of pain that you sort of unfortunately sort of received over the journey. It will answer that question. So just focus on getting it done. Get it done. All what we need is evidence. Black people, we need evidence. There's no evidence, we didn't exist. If there's no evidence, you're of no importance. Evidence. These are life questions, baby. I mean, so you're not easy on me. I'm gonna be corny. I apologize. Just be corny. Dude. It's love. I mean, there's LOVE. I mean, that's what I love. I mean, it's just love. I mean, it's just beautiful. I mean, again, it sounds corny. Again, I feel embarrassed even saying it, but the love. It's beautiful when you could talk to people and have a laugh and you feel people and things creatively come out. It's about creativity, and in a good, healthy environment, great stuff happens. So I would say that. I mean, I just love learning from other people because, I want to be a better person. And that's corny. I apologize. Sounds like that much like therapy. But when you're dealing with art, it can only give you so much great stuff. And again, even the dark stuff. What is it? I want to obliterate all shadows. That's what it's about, obliterating all shadows. And it's very healthy in that way. And it's hard and it's confrontational and all that business, but that's what I would say. I think if I learned that, I want to continue to do that. And with you and others, it's very important. I have no idea. Yeah, possibly. I have no idea. You know what? I didn't have a choice. That was my choice. I had to be. The only thing I could do was draw. I could draw. That's what I could do. I was dyslexic. I was the guy with that guy with the person with the patch over one eye in the class. That was me. And I couldn't see the fucking blackboard, but I could draw. So drawing was my art was my salvation. So I had to be an artist. I couldn't do anything else. I love film. I love art, and I just love film. I just love making stuff. I love, I love being in the crew, and I just love art. I love film. I mean, film is so exciting. I mean, I grew up, in London, and I fell in love. I was in love with this girl. I was in love with this Swiss girl. And I didn't know cinema. I was more like in the back row of the seat, kissing girls or trying to kiss girls in the back row of the seat rather than watching this movie theater, the cinema. And after a while, you get one eye open and think, oh, what's that? And then you get interested. And then I was in a situation where I fell in love with this woman and at the same time fell in love with cinema. It was the most exhilarating. I get goosebumps. I feel like imagine you do. Maybe you're a young man, maybe you are in love or you will be in love. But when you love someone and they return their love for you as a teenager, it's pretty amazing because you never had those feelings before. And you're discovering cinema. It was absolutely mind blowing. So that fact again, the LOVE word comes in all the time. Danny, I felt very corny, very.
Corny's nice.
I know, but it's the truth. We all need it right now, and I think that was me, and that motivates me. I would say love and art. That's what I would say. It's the truth. I mean, there's nothing else. Nothing else to live for, nothing to die for is love. That's it. So the fact that cinema was my passion, And you could talk about so many things through this medium and deal with all the difficult stuff. Again, no shadows. That's what it's about. In focusing, like I said, this lady, go for it. I often, like I said before, I didn't, as a black man, have the privilege. I don't think I didn't have that privilege of, trauma. Get the fuck on with it, and then deal with it like I had to. Because if I had stopped or again, it's difficult, but my dealing with a certain kind of trauma was to do stuff. I work a lot, and I work very hard, and I love it. Maybe I work too much, but I love working. I love it. So keep on fucking working. Just work. WORK and LOVE.